I never imagined that saying yes to a simple favor would change everything. When my friend asked me to give his dad a ride, I didn't think twice. I thought it would be just another quick drive, nothing special. But what happened next turned out to be one of the most unexpected, life-altering experiences I've ever had. It all started with a text from my friend Nate. "Hey man, can you do me a huge favor? My dad's car is in the shop and I'm stuck at work. Can you give him a ride home?" I didn't hesitate. Nate and I had been close for years, and his dad, Mr. Calloway, had always been around. He seemed like a good guy, the kind of man people noticed when he entered a room, tall, broad-shouldered, always dressed sharp, with a calm, effortless charm. But to me, he was just Nate's dad. That was all. "Sure, no problem," I replied, unaware that this ride was going to be anything but ordinary. When I pulled up to the office building Nate had mentioned, I expected to see a man tired after a long day, ready to head home. Instead, Mr. Calloway was leaning casually against the curb, dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly. His graying hair was neatly styled, and his deep blue eyes caught the glow of the setting sun as he noticed my car. He stepped in smoothly, and the scent of his cologne, rich, warm, with a hint of spice, immediately filled the space between us. "You're a lifesaver," he said with a smile that felt warmer than it should have. "It's nothing," I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the road. We started with the usual small talk, his day, Nate, work stuff. But there was something different in his tone. His voice was smooth and low, laced with a hint of amusement every time he spoke. And then I noticed it, the way his eyes lingered on me just a little too long. The atmosphere in the car shifted, subtle but real, like a low current humming beneath the surface. "So, where am I taking you?" I asked, trying to stay focused on driving. He gave me a small smirk. "Just a quick stop before home. Need to pick something up." "Won't take long." I nodded, but something in his voice sent a flicker of tension through me. As we drove, the city lights danced across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw. He leaned back, relaxed, one hand resting on his thigh, fingers tapping idly. His wedding ring caught the passing light, and I forced myself to stay focused. This was my friend's dad. This was just a favor, just a ride. But then he turned to me, his voice even lower. "You've really grown up, you know," he said, his fingers briefly brushing across his knee. "I still remember when you and Nate were just kids. And now look at you." My throat went dry. "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "Time flies, I guess." His eyes met mine and held them just a second too long. That's when I realized this wasn't just a casual ride anymore. Something unspoken lingered in the space between us. I tried to concentrate on the road, but my thoughts were drifting, tangled in the tension I couldn't shake. Mr. Calloway's presence filled the car, his voice, his scent, the confident way he carried himself. It wasn't overt, but it was intentional. "You've really grown up," he said again, this time slower, his fingers drawing invisible patterns on his thigh. "I remember when you and Nate used to tear through the house like little maniacs. Now look at you, all grown." I let out a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, time really flies." But the way he looked at me, there was something else behind it, something I couldn't ignore. Finally, we pulled into the driveway of the address he'd given me, a sleek townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. The porch light was on, but the house itself felt still, almost too quiet. "I won't be long," he said, offering me a small smile as he unbuckled his seatbelt. I watched him step out, adjusting his suit jacket with casual precision. My stomach tightened for reasons I couldn't fully explain. I kept watching as he walked up the steps and knocked twice. The door opened, revealing another man, tall, built, dressed sharply in dark slacks and a crisp shirt. His expression was unreadable, his gaze flickering briefly from Mr. Calloway to my car. They spoke in low, hushed voices. Something about the way they stood, close, familiar, felt off, but I couldn't place why. Minutes passed, then more. I glanced at the clock. 15 minutes. Still nothing. I looked back at the porch. The light above the door flickered faintly, casting strange shadows. The house was still. Something about all of it felt wrong. Just as I was just reaching for my phone to text him when the front door opened. Mr. Calloway stepped out, but he wasn't alone. The man from earlier followed him, standing just behind. His posture was tense. I noticed the way Mr. Calloway paused, the brief moment his body stiffened before he forced a smile. He walked back to the car with that same calm, easy confidence. But I saw it. There was a flicker in his eyes. Was it regret? Guilt? Sliding back into the passenger seat, he adjusted his tie, like his hands needed something to do. "Sorry about that," he said, though his voice had a new edge. "No problem," I replied, my hands tightening on the wheel. "Everything good?" He hesitated. "Yeah, of course." But I wasn't convinced. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror. The man was still on the porch, watching us leave. There was something in the way he stood that made my skin crawl. I had the sudden, unshakable feeling that whatever had just happened inside that house, I wasn't supposed to know about it. But the night wasn't over, not even close. The ride started off in silence, uncomfortable, heavy silence. Mr. Calloway sat with his hands clasped in his lap, staring straight ahead. But I could feel the weight of his thoughts filling the space between us. It was the kind of silence that begs to be broken, but neither of us made the first move. I should have let it go. I should have just kept driving. But something inside me itched, like a puzzle begging to be solved. "You sure everything was okay back there?" I asked, glancing at him before returning my eyes to the road. He paused, and that pause said more than any words could. "Yeah," he finally said, but his tone was careful, practiced, like he was choosing each word too precisely. "Just an old friend catching up." I didn't buy it. I thought of the man on the porch, arms crossed, eyes hard and unreadable. That didn't look like someone reminiscing with an old friend. That looked like someone watching, assessing, maybe even controlling. Still, I couldn't push too far. Not yet. "Didn't look like much of a friend," I said, trying to sound casual, though even I could hear the edge in my voice. Mr. Calloway exhaled slowly, fingers brushing over the cuff of his sleeve, a nervous tick. "Things are complicated," he admitted, finally meeting my eyes as we paused at a red light. "You know how life is. Sometimes you make choices, and those choices follow you a lot longer than you expect." His words hung in the air between us, charged with something he wasn't ready to say. I nodded, unsure how to respond. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. Minutes passed, and slowly the tension started to shift. He exhaled again, this time softer, his head leaning back against the seat. His shoulders dropped, relaxing just a bit. "You know," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, "I never thought I'd see you again after all these years. It's nice." There it was again, that undertone, the same one I'd felt earlier. It made my pulse skip. "Yeah, same," I said, swallowing hard. The silence returned, but now it felt different. It wasn't awkward, it was charged, like something unspoken hung between us. I tried to focus on the road, to remind myself that this was Nate's dad, that I was just imagining it. But then he reached over, softly, deliberately, his fingertips brushing my sleeve. The touch was light but intentional, not an accident. I tensed, my grip on the steering wheel tightening. He slowly pulled his hand back, his smile faint, just enough to make my chest clench. "Relax," he said gently. "You're too tense." I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. "Yeah, well, it's been a weird night." Mr. Calloway chuckled, and for a moment the heaviness in the air lifted. But the story didn't end there. A pair of headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, bright against the dark. I glanced back, and something in my gut twisted. I didn't recognize the car, but it was following us. I switched lanes. So did they. A slow creeping sense of unease crawled up my spine. Mr. Calloway noticed. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, jaw tight. "I think we're being followed." His expression shifted, just slightly, but I caught it. Fear, worry. It was subtle, but real. He turned to look back, his lips pressed into a tight line. "Drive faster," he said, his voice quieter now. I did, and the car behind us did too. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned onto a side street, weaving through back roads to try and shake them. But they stayed on us, relentless. I glanced at Mr. Calloway, his fists clenched in his lap, his posture tense. "Take the next left," he said sharply. I followed his directions, my tires hugging the curb too closely as I fought to stay in control. The other car didn't let up, and then, suddenly, they were gone. I didn't slow down. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, my breath uneven. Mr. Calloway closed his eyes for a moment, then turned to me. "Take me somewhere safe," he said. And for the first time all night, his voice was completely unguarded. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. Because whatever this was, it was far from over. I drove in silence, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds to be sure we'd really lost them. City lights blurred past us. Neon signs flickered across the wet pavement. Maybe it was the way his hands clenched, bracing for a fight that never came. But I didn't argue. Instead, I let out a long breath, leaned back in the chair, ran a hand through my hair, and looked him in the eye. "Not happening." He shook his head, his expression caught between frustration and something else, something almost like gratitude. "You don't understand what you're getting into." "Then explain." "Then tell me," I shot back, my voice low but firm. "Because I don't like being chased through the streets without knowing why." For a moment he hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the window like he was expecting Victor to be out there, waiting in the shadows. And maybe he was. But finally he spoke. His voice was softer now, more controlled, like every word had to be chosen carefully. "I met Victor 2 years ago," he said, "back when I was at my lowest. My marriage was falling apart. Nate's mom and we hadn't been in love for a long time. We were just strangers, living under the same roof." He paused, swallowing hard. His fingers twitched against the bedspread. "Then I met him. Victor made me feel alive again, wanted, seen. He gave me something I hadn't felt in years, and I mistook it for love." I exhaled slowly, watching his mouth part slightly, the rise and fall of his shoulders, like he was carrying something too heavy to bear alone. "But Victor doesn't love people," he continued. "He possesses them." I clenched my jaw. "So you left?" I tried. Silence filled the space between us, thick and unrelenting. I should have been focused on the danger, on whatever kind of threat Victor posed, but instead my eyes drifted to Calloway, to the way his shirt had come undone at the collar, just enough to reveal the strength beneath it. I shouldn't have been thinking about it. But I was. "And now he wants you back," I murmured. He nodded slowly, eyes meeting mine. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it, something else, something unspoken. "You don't have to do this alone," I said before I could stop myself. He scoffed. "You don't owe me anything." "I know." Another pause, a silence so full of weight it nearly echoed. Then he laughed, soft and low, shaking his head. "You always were a stubborn kid. I'm not a kid anymore." The words landed between us. heavier than I meant them to. His gaze shifted. His breath caught, just slightly. I wasn't imagining it. I saw the way his throat moved as he swallowed, the way his fingers flexed against his thighs, the way his body betrayed the thoughts he was trying so hard to lock away. And when I stepped closer, he didn't pull back. "I know," he whispered, voice barely audible. I should have stopped, should have turned around and left the motel room, let the night end before it became something impossible to take back. But I didn't. Instead, I reached out, my fingers brushing the cuff of his sleeve, just a touch, barely there, but it was enough. His breath hitched again, and when I looked up, his eyes were darker, his pupils blown wide. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "I know." I leaned in, slow, deliberate, and when my lips finally met his, I felt it. The way his body tensed, the sharp inhale like he'd been holding his breath all night. But he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, cautious, like he was testing something he'd never let himself feel before. The moment my fingers slid into his hair, tilting his head gently, he let go. A sound escaped him, half sigh, half groan, sending a wave of heat straight through me. His hands finally moved. One gripped my wrist, the other ran up my arm, his touch urgent like he'd been holding back for far too long. I deepened the kiss, pressing closer until his back met the headboard. His hands found my waist, pulling me in, and I let him. Let myself get swept away in the way his lips moved against mine, in the way his breath caught whenever I kissed him a little harder, in the way his grip tightened like he needed something, someone, to hold on to. He tasted like whiskey and something darker, something heady, addictive. When his hands slipped under the hem of my shirt, skimming my skin, my resolve cracked. "We shouldn't," he whispered, but I didn't let him finish. "Then stop me." He didn't. Instead, he pulled me closer. What happened next I won't describe, but it was messy, desperate, a collision of years of repressed feelings and unspoken truths finally surfacing in the dark quiet of that small motel room. And when it was over, when we finally collapsed, breathless and tangled in sheets that smelled faintly of detergent and him, we lay in silence. Only our breathing filled the space, the rise and fall of his chest beneath my fingertips, the warmth of his body pressed against mine. Eventually he sighed, running a hand down his face. Nate can never know. I turned my head, watching him. His face was half in shadow, unreadable. "I know." A long silence, followed. Then, softer. "I don't regret it." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Neither do I." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a one-time thing. As much as I wanted to believe we could leave it here, I already knew. This was only the beginning. The air still hung heavy with the scent of us. His cologne lingered in the sheets, a soft whisper of what had just happened. The flickering motel lamp cast long shadows across the room, but we didn't move. I lay beside him, my fingers grazing his chest, feeling the calm rhythm of his breath. He was still catching it. His body relaxed in a way that told me he hadn't let go like this in years. I studied his face, his dark hair tousled, lips slightly swollen. Tension melted away. His arm rested over his stomach, fingers twitching faintly like his body was still trying to come back down. I smirked, my fingers teasing over the dips of his abdomen, toying with the edge of the sheet that barely covered him. "So, is this the part where you tell me it was a mistake?" I asked. He let out a long breath, then turned his head. His eyes met mine, dark, intense, something new behind them. "Do I look like I regret it?" His voice was rough, low, still edged with something raw and real. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned in, pressing a kiss to his collarbone, tasting salt and skin and memory. His fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, his breath catching as my lips trailed down. "You're insatiable," he murmured, but there was amusement in his voice. "You bring it out in me." I felt his body tense beneath me, his fingers tightening just slightly. He guided me, told me without words exactly what he wanted. And God, did I want him too? By the time I rose again, his hands were on me, pulling me in. His mouth met mine, hot and hungry, every touch deliberate, every movement set something wild and electric in motion. "One more time," I whispered against his lips, gripping his shoulders. He growled softly, flipping me onto my back, his body pressing down on mine. His lips brushed my ear, voice husky. "You sure you can handle it?" I arched into him, heat flaring again. "Try me." And he did. Hours passed. We didn't check the time. It didn't matter. Nothing beyond this room existed. Not Victor. Not Nate. Not the consequences waiting for us with the sunrise. Right now, there was only him. Only us. By the time we finally lay still, the sky outside had shifted to deep blue, dawn slowly breaking through the thin curtains. We were tangled together, his arm wrapped around my waist, his breath warm against the back of my neck. "We should probably get some sleep," he murmured, but neither of us moved. "Yeah," I said, tracing idle shapes on his skin. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was intimate, familiar. "What happens now?" I finally asked. He let out a long, slow breath, then kissed my temple. "We figure it out." I knew this wouldn't be easy. I knew the moment we stepped outside this room, reality would hit like a freight train. But right now, I didn't care, because whatever came next, I wasn't letting him go. The motel room still clung to the memory of us. The air thick with heat, with the echoes of what we'd done. His cologne still lingered on my skin, the sheets twisted in the aftermath of our hunger. Mr. Calloway sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting golden shadows across his chest. His fingers moved lazily over my thigh, not saying a word. But the silence between us was anything but empty. It was heavy. It was everything we had said with our hands, our lips, our bodies, and everything we hadn't dared put into words. I watched him, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his lips were still slightly swollen from mine, the dark marks I'd left like constellations across his throat. He didn't look like the man I'd first met. Not the careful father. Not the polished professional, but someone real, raw, undone. I reached for him again, grazing his wrist, feeling the steady beat of his pulse beneath my touch. He tensed for a moment, then relaxed back onto his elbows. "Again?" he asked, voice rough with exhaustion but laced with amusement. I smirked, crawling over him, pressing my lips to the curve of his neck. He responded instantly. His body didn't lie. "Unless you've had enough," I teased, letting my teeth graze lightly against his skin. His hand shot up, gripping the back of my neck, pulling me into another kiss. Slower, deeper this time, like he was tasting something he knew he shouldn't want, but couldn't help reaching for anyway. "I should stop," he whispered against my lips. But his hands were telling a different story. They slid down my back, pulled me in closer. He didn't want to stop. "Then stop," I murmured. I moved against him, felt his breath catch, saw the way his grip tightened, the way his restraint broke all over.
Again. And just like that, we were tangled in each other once more. It was reckless, desperate, consuming. But I didn't care. I didn't care that this couldn't last, that we had no idea what came next. I only cared about this. The way he made me feel, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. By the time we collapsed again, our breaths shallow and our bodies spent, the first light of dawn had crept through the curtains, casting a warm, hazy glow across his face. He turned to me, his eyes unreadable. "This is dangerous," he said softly. I know. I don't know how to stop. Then don't. He let out a shaky breath, his hand trailing slowly down my arm, across my waist, like he was trying to memorize every inch of me. Nate can never know. I swallowed hard. The name was like a needle, sharp and real. Then what do we do? I asked. He didn't answer right away, just turned onto his side, his fingers still moving gently across my skin. We keep this a secret, he said quietly. Just for us. For now. And if I don't want to keep it a secret? His jaw clenched, but he didn't look away. Then we figure that out when the time comes. I could feel the weight of it all pressing in again. Victor. Nate. The quiet truth that this was spiraling into something neither of us had planned for. But when he pulled me close again, when he kissed me like he hadn't had enough, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over, not even close. And I didn't know what would happen when the truth finally came out. But one thing was certain. I wasn't ready to let him go. Not now. Not ever.